Hey everyone, it's Rick. I'm saying hello and I want to do a little Q&A session, just a short one this week. I have some great examples from some of my customers that I want to show us, particularly Steve and Nathan, who obviously, he always does a great job. Well, not obviously, if you haven't seen the other videos, you wouldn't know. But here's some questions from, I have two questions from Chris Steven. His first question was, hey, hi Rick. No sooner did I use hydrogen peroxide on a Batman 227, nice book, to remove tanning in the back, and I saw your recent Q&A video about H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide, making paper brittle if you don't neutralize it. And you'll definitely see that, especially in the spine of a book or any place that the paper has moved a lot. Here I thought it just turned to water. It will eventually turn to water. Well, I'll explain it later. So I have some powdered oxalic acid, and I read that this is one thing. It's true, because oxalic acid is a reducing agent and peroxide is an oxidizing agent, and they can, but it's not on a time frame that suits us. So what do you recommend? Thanks in advance. Obviously, by the way, I've been taking lots of before and after photos. I'll share with you soon. Big boy books too. Great. Sweet. I said, hi Chris. H2O2 can definitely embrittle paper, particularly the spine of books in places where paper is fatigued. Peroxide does indeed decompose into water and oxygen, but those electrons have to come from somewhere, and the somewhere can very easily be your paper. Oxalate will probably work, but I've never used it myself. I think the activation energy is probably very high, meaning that you would have to heat up the book, I just put book, to encourage the reaction and make it spontaneous. So I had never really tried that. I've always thought that that's a low time order thing. So I think, if I could be wrong, but I think it's just going to take a long time to work properly. I often use Ki tablets. So what I do is I use potassium iodide tablets, and that's what I use with water, and I rub it on peroxide. I take a little, sometimes I use a paintbrush or a pasture pipette dropper, and I just rub it on there. It's a dilute. I don't really measure how much I put in there, just to help neutralize the peroxide. It's a good way to stop peroxide's oxidizing effects on paper. And so, and he said, to be clear, Kay, you mean the stuff you take after accidentally getting nuked, right? Potassium iodide. Yep, that stuff you can buy at any like CVS or like a pharmacy store. He also writes, something for YouTube, perhaps. Now that I have delved a bit into the dark arts of wet cleaning, I love that. I find myself pondering, fearing, and ultimately hating the tide line, pre-existent and self-created alike, which can happen when you are cleaning books, certainly, especially under a fluorescent light. I've seen others remove them with seemingly relative ease on YouTube, but I struggle a bit. Now, to the topic, tide lines, what are they? How can they best be avoided or minimized to begin with, and what are they? I mean, physically and literally, it appears to be the squiggly brown line that one might assume this is a concentrated soluble material all gravitate at the edges. He's exactly right. A beginner might make the mistake of trying to physically erase, geez, Lord, don't do that, but often to no avail, if not to the detriment. This is concentrated mineral matter, dead bits of pulp. I don't really know what's in them. Often it is little bits of paper fines, I call it, and solubilized material, probably oxidized cellulose is my guess, but I don't really know. The idea to dissipate it and reversing the direction of the tide with subsequent Q-tip movements. I really do enjoy the detail and minutia of that aspect of the hobby. I love this. Any dimwit with $170 can press a few books and get some improvement, and we've seen it done lots of times. Sure, that is exactly true. You know all this, of course. Anyway, I'll have a few minutes on the subject of tide lines. Be verbose and granular as you please. Well, what's tide line? Let me see if I can get a picture of an actual tide line for you. And so an actual tide line looks like this. This isn't a tide, right? And this is kind of where the idea of tide lines comes from, because it's from mapping. When people would map tides, they would look at these lines, and people thought there was a familiarity with it. So a tide line looks like this. Here's a really bad example, and this person is using a solvent and a brush to bring the tide line out, to basically solubilize it out of the paper. So what do I do? First of all, how do I avoid it and what do I do? Well, a lot of times I can't avoid it. It's very hard to avoid tide lines, so I don't really have a good tip for you. That's the bad news. Because when you are especially wet cleaning, it is possible that you can do that. Now, the way I reduce it is by using my makeup pads when I clean, and then rinsing with water. A lot of the stuff that would make a tide line comes up in those makeup pads. So use dozens of those things. Just go through them because you want that stuff to come up off the book, and generally they'll be reduced or diminished, or they'll just be gone entirely. But what I do is I use a slant board. I don't have my current slant board is broken. I'm trying to build and design another one. When I get back home, I'm traveling now. When I get back home, I'll show you what I'm starting with. But if you just pantomime me a little bit, it's essentially just a slanted piece of acrylic. And often I'll have to take the book apart, which means pull the staples out and take a page out of it. And I have a pump and an aerosol sprayer, or a mister, that will spray a solvent, a solution of solvents, onto the book and it'll run down the board back into a reservoir that keeps coming around again, and it sprays and it rinses the paper off the board. It is exceptionally difficult to get tide lines off of a book without taking the book apart. You need gravity to kind of feed and run that down, and that's only good for tide. You don't want to do that with ink, dear God, because it'll just run the ink down the whole book. But a lot of the water soluble or soap soluble things can just run right out of the book, and they'll spread, and it takes a long time. And the other thing is that, remember, wet paper is weak paper. Wet paper is weak paper. It will rip if you have any kind of weight on it at all. So you have to really support the back of the book, the back of that page that you're rinsing. You want to get the whole thing flat if you can. But if you can't, you can only fit half of it on there. You got to make sure that the weight is supported on something. I use a thing called a lab jack, and it holds the back of the book up. And then it has to dry in place. You don't take it off, don't touch it, don't do anything else with it. Just leave it on that. Just leave it on that slant board as it dries. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put a piece of silicone sheet or Teflon sheet on the slant board. I'll use those little brown paper binder clips on the side, so that can just remove it and put it in a place where it will dry, just air dry for a while. And then, of course, you'll have to reassemble the book and press. It's quite a bit of work, so I don't do it a lot. But it works. You can do that quite well. If the tide line is something that isn't water soluble, then you're really hosed. Then you really have to think about starting using polar solvents, and those will non-polar solvents, and those will often take the ink off the book if you use a slant board. So you have to be really careful and judicious. If you want to leave it on the book, if you really want to leave the book together and do this, what you have to do is get your page wet with water. However you can. I use a makeup pad and just kind of dab it on there, and then just let it sit, and then just dab it with a fresh makeup pad to take it off again. And that would work a little bit. You're not going to have great success, I don't predict. But that's it. So that's it for this week. Just a short one, and I might give you some more examples later. But anyway, this is Rick. I'm in Texas this week. I wanted to say hi and take care. Bye bye.